What's up, everybody? Welcome to Sorrow Talk. I'm your host, Eric from Sorrow23, and this episode is going to be all about mental health. We're going to be talking about mental health stigmas and what to do for recovery and treatment, the increasing awareness in our society of it compared to how it was viewed before, all kinds of cool stuff like that. And this episode, I have a very special guest here, a very good friend of mine. This gentleman has done a lot of cool stuff in the mental health field and also for the kingdom of God. Please welcome Mr. Dave Dicken. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Hey, Eric, how's it going? Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell everybody about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a crisis counselor at Crisis Text Line. I also provide services in the community for trauma and mental wellness. So I do a lot of domestic violence, anything with abuse, neglect, abandonment. I do a lot of foster care. I help young men and women in crisis. I also work with families where there's discord or things are just not working out well with family communication, children going to school, grades, drug use, mental health, homelessness, a lot of the things you see on the news and on TV and you hear about in your neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome work. You know, I know today's society is a lot of just crazy things going on out there that I really think affects people's mental states. And I have some stuff I've researched here a little bit, so some mental health articles that I've pulled up. This one says that 22.8% of U.S. adults experienced mental illness in 2021. And also, through the same poll here, 41.2% of U.S. adults received treatment in 2021. And then it goes on to say that 16.5% of the U.S. youth, that's ages 6 to 17, experienced a mental disorder in 2016. And then also in 2016, 50.6% of the youth got treatment. How does all that play into your work with those kind of numbers?
Yeah, so it's a big demand. And, you know, when families have a loved one like these statistics from a young adult, honestly, they don't know what to do. Some dismiss it. Some think that medication is the answer. And most feel just flat out uninformed, unequipped, and overwhelmed. So they reach out. Hopefully they can get my name through word of mouth. And then I can come in and begin to educate and begin to help them navigate the system so they can get the treatment that you referenced. So it's very involved, but there is hope, and we do have resources. And also, the more I do this, the more it's not just someone with the diagnosis, but it's the family members surrounding that loved one and the support that they're looking to offer and provide. Often we'll have children that are suffering from some mental instability. Emotional instability would probably be a better way to word it. And the parents, or even extended family or siblings, could have differences on how they want to address supporting the person in their house who's experiencing these emotional conditions of, anxiety, deep depression, possibly isolation, mania. There's lots of ways that we see how this is lived out from these various diagnoses and the trauma that goes along with it.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of families are affected. And another article here, it says that 8.4 million people in the U.S. provide care to an adult with a mental or emotional health issue. So I know you work with a lot of the families. How much trauma do you see in the families that don't have mental illness themselves, but their family members, they take care of somebody?
Yeah, so if I get a phone call from a mom who's telling me about her daughter or her son, chances are when I start asking questions like, well, what does your self-care look like? How are you sleeping? What does your diet look like? What does your social community look like? And most of the time the answers are, well, I did have good community, and I was exercising, and I was eating well, and I was sleeping well, but now I put that all aside because I'm caring for my loved one who's suffering from a mental health condition.
Right. Yeah, so it's like they're that's how heavily they're affected, right? Their health starts to decline a little bit.
Potentially it can. So we want to start So the first thing we want to do is address self-care with the supporters in that family. The stronger the families are, and the better the communication is in those families, the better off their loved one who's suffering from a diagnosis will be served.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's really good. You know, in some of this research I found too, we see some of these like struggles in the past, and I know today it's gotten a lot better. And for example, this one article says that mentally ill are far more likely to be victims of violent crime rather than the perpetrators. 3 to 5% of violent crimes can be tied in some way to a person's mental illness. The disappearance of psychiatric hospitals and asylums is part of the long-term trend towards deinstitutionalization, but jails and prisons have taken their place. Activists and professionals like to pinpoint it on Ronald Reagan in the 1981 Budget Reconciliation Bill that kind of like it slashes the funds, for mental health programs. But we see some turnarounds here. In this article, in 1983, they passed the legislation passed the Mental Health Act, which is the law outlined the basis of rights that are mentally unwell inpatients have had to be hospitalized and sanctioned against their will for their own health and the safety and protection of others around them. Following that act, charities and groups populated in the country in the 1980s. Celebrities like Princess Diana came out with their struggles, and she had depression and self-harm. People like Diana, society transformed and began to consider accepting anyone in their lives that could be struggling with their mental health and need support rather than be stigmatized, is the quote of that article. How do you see that with people you work with today, like coming out and not being afraid anymore of some of the stigmas?
Well, first, let me address what you mentioned earlier about these mental support arms that were closed and things have changed dramatically in that area. One of the things that causes that, in my opinion, is that we focus on behavior. So we see our loved ones suffering and maybe they lose their temper. Maybe they're screaming at 3 o'clock in the morning. Maybe to the statistics point, there's violent crime involved. So these are behaviors. But what we're finding to be most beneficial is looking and finding the root cause. You see, we live in a penal society, and because we're very penal the way we think and the way we discipline and the way we look for accountability, that often we find too many people being incarcerated when they would be better served through like a mental awareness solution. So
Right.
we want to be more solutions informed. And to your point, Eric, we want to bust the stigma. My friend GJ Twong has a podcast and an organization called Erasing Shame. We want to erase the shame. The behavior's real that I mentioned earlier, but we're going to have better results if we can best address the root cause.
Right, yeah, that's really good, and I really love how there's so many organizations out there that are really kind of busting the stigmas. One particular group that I found, it's a company called Better Health. It says here that a mental health platform that provides online mental health services directly to clients, counseling and therapy services provided through a web-based interaction. BetterHelp was founded in 2013, and fairly new, right? And I myself have been seeing BetterHelp TV commercials. I don't know if you have, but there's like these commercials on TV where people are like, it's almost set up like a webcam kind of thing, and they're like, hey, I'm setting up for my therapy session now, and they just kind of talk openly about getting the help that they needed, and it's no longer like this. They're not like ashamed of it. You know what I mean? So how much do you see like the shame on mental health, and then what do you do to kind of address that with people that don't want to come out with that?
Yeah, so these commercials that you're referencing are very helpful because they do look to erase that stigma and provide safe space for people to be open about their feelings. Now, in the same way that we're looking to support family members with good self-care, we also want to treat people that are suffering from some diagnosis with a wholeness approach.
Mm.
So in the same way, self-care is going to have diet, exercise, meditation, spirituality, sleep, and all those important components. We also want our loved one who's suffering to be involved in these various categories where they can have a good social life, where they can have a good diet, where they can have that space to be open about their feelings and treat them holistically. We're finding those to be the best results because it distributes the health and it treats the whole person and not just the diagnosis itself, but the feelings and the trauma and the behavior that follows having the diagnosis.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like there's more there than just like a couple of therapy techniques, maybe some medication. Like you want to go beyond that. That just sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah, we want to address the root cause. We want to treat each person on a case by case basis. And the most important tool that I can share with your listeners is that we need to listen to learn. We need to sit down with our loved ones and ask them questions like, how can I best support you? Can you tell me how you're feeling? Can you tell me what isolating looks like? Can you tell me what developing new community might look like? What better describes the way you are right now? Surviving or thriving? And where do you want to be? Can you tell me about your dreams and goals? Tell me more about your creativity. You know, for years you played the guitar and now I see it hanging up on the wall. So clearly things have changed. So how can we, get re-engaged and how can we reframe the way we're currently feeling about ourselves so we can move away from this place of surviving into a place where even with a diagnosis, we can thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. It sounds like very, very like empowering questions. Right.
Yeah, we look to empower and we look to help people connect. You see, when we're isolating, we're not connected. But when we're socially active, we begin to stay connected, to get connected, and to develop those connections. And we want to make sure that our loved one have good, healthy, and to use your terms, Eric, we want to have connections that build us up. We want to have connections that make us strong. We want to have connections and community with people that remind us who we really are. Because if you're listening today, I want to share with you that your diagnosis or the trauma you're working through does not define you. God does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that identity component. I know working with you myself, we talk a lot about that, is your true identity. And a lot of times, what I've seen in myself, like my mental health battles and struggles, like, it can overtake you and, start to get in your head of like, this is who I am, but it's really not your true identity.
Yeah, so as a crisis counselor, a crisis text line, one of the things that I hear over and over from people who reach out, they'll say things like, no one understands me, I don't have any friends, I can't. I've got people that graduated from Cal Berkeley, Stanford, USC, Harvard. I know one young man that graduated with a law degree from Cal Berkeley on a full ride. That's high intelligence. Yet right now, because of some deep trauma and some very negative experiences that he's gone through in his family, he has a low self-worth and low confidence. The intelligence is still there, but it's dormant right now because of his confidence. And you see what we're finding is that there's a relationship between self-worth and low confidence. And when people have low confidence, it's hard for them to reach out and put their intelligence to work. My opinion from the work that I do is that low self-worth is the biggest issue among our youth today.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I want to talk a little bit about this organization, one of the biggest ones, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, otherwise known as NAMI. You work with NAMI quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I work with the Orange County affiliate, So I teach family to family, where we're bringing education to families that are supporting their loved one. I'm also on some of their knowledge forums where I share tips and tools on best support your loved one suffering from a mental health condition. And I also work with some of the youth directors and some of the outreaches at NAMI Orange County.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about them. What are some of the successes you've seen come out of NAMI?
Well, NAMI has a lot of great programs. So they've got peer programs, they've got family programs, they've got mentor programs. So these are all unique to the place that you are in within these stories of, mental health journeys. So if you're a parent, you can go to family to family. If you're suffering from a diagnosis, then you can go to the peer support, or you could look into a mentor program, or you could get connected and view some of the knowledge forums and get more educated. They've got classes on Social Security, different county benefits, or other, government funded and provided, benefits that are in resources that are there for you to use to, move away from the survive and into a place, where you can thrive even with a mental health condition. Yes, a lot of my clients, they dismiss their dreams and goals when they begin to realize, hey, I'm really struggling here. But yet deep down, those dreams and goals are still there. And the feelings and the desires to thrive are still there. So as supporters, we serve a very valuable role in the lives of people who are struggling emotionally, because those dreams and goals are still there. And one of the things that we can do is we can help our loved ones excavate, and we can remind them of what their dreams and goals were, and get them to process that, and get them to continue to dream and to have goals and to be creative Creativity is another very valuable tool to help one manage their stressors, their triggers, and develop a stronger and more healthier self-worth. One of my clients, just to go further, Eric, when I asked this young adult about creativity, in fact, this 21-year-old is going through the transgender experience, and the 21-year-old, when I asked about creativity, the young adult said that when I'm creative, I'm in touch with the good things about myself. And that really got my attention. So, friends, if you're supporting a loved one suffering from emotional instability, help them get in touch with the good things about themselves. That's what you're there for, and you can be a hero in somebody's life and in somebody's emotional journey to wellness.
Yeah, that's so good. One of the cool things that I get to be a part of with you is because Dave and I go to the same church, and there's a ministry that he got involved in with our pastor and started it called the Grace Group. And I really love Grace Group. It's helped me out a lot in my journey. And there's a workbook we go through, the Grace Alliance. You want to talk a little bit about Grace Group, how that...
Yeah, so Grace Alliance is an organization out of Texas. And one of the co-founder is Joe Padilla. He wrote the material. And there's several Grace Group materials. It's open discussion. It has Bible verses, Bible stories would be a better way of saying it, with some follow-up group discussion questions about the significance of the story that we're reading for that week. So we could be talking about identity, managing stressors, developing resilience, dealing with triggers, and we associate different Bible stories with how God addresses this, or how Jesus addressed this during his ministry time on earth. And we really see a lot of value in the faith-based component, because there's just an anchor that goes with that, where we learn that God, delivers grace. And as supporters, we can help people through grace. And we also learn that grace empowers, that grace motivates. Earlier I talked about how people focus on behavior. If you move away from focusing on behavior and focusing on the person through grace, and Joe Padilla's motto was love them well. If we all could love each other well and accept people for who we are, and if we would deploy God's mighty weapons And when I say God's mighty weapons, I'm talking about things like grace, kindness, unconditional love, and accepting people for who they are. And Eric, along those lines of accepting people for who they are, when families call and reach out for support, and I meet with them and I talk about the discord as a group, we discuss the disharmony and the discord and the fighting and the poor communication and the low resolution skills that family's experiencing. Parents, if you're listening, let me share this with you. When I go into a situation where there's trauma and low resolution skills and fighting and arguing, and the parents say to me, Dave, what can we do differently? Those are the families that start to de-escalate, start to develop tools to understand each other and to better communicate, and everybody wins.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love how that all ties in with like families. I know the Grace Group is a lot of like supporters of somebody and people with their own condition, kind of like a mixed group. And I love how I get to see both sides of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's really been kind of a pilot having a mixed group, and we've done a great job of making it work. Although I don't really like that word, like making it work, because nobody's twisting our arms about it. It just flows. And people with a diagnosis have trauma in addition to their diagnosis, and people supporting their loved ones have their own unique set of traumas, and they could have previous trauma, new trauma, ongoing trauma, and then we can get into what some people call like double abuse, and that's where somebody opens up about their feelings, and the feelings are either dismissed or they're given a Bible verse, or in so many words, if you would just repent, or they start addressing the behavior, like I said earlier, that can produce another set of trauma. So that's why these groups and the therapy that Eric is making reference to were a second set of eyes. I come from the outside when I go into these families, and when we get that second set of eyes and that outside input, and from those outside observations, we can really begin to speak life into a difficult situation where there appears to be mostly darkness and unhappiness. We can usher in light and joy. And one of the things you'll hear my clients who are really struggling is that I'll share with them the light overcomes the darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. Light really does overcome the darkness, especially through Jesus, especially through following God and His grace. I love what you said there about grace. Is that like it's empowering and motivating? You know what I mean? Because grace is like the unmerited favor that we like in a way don't deserve, but we get it from God anyway. Because that's the power of His love. Yeah, I love that. As we come to a close of this episode, Dave, I always ask this in my episodes to my guests. What's the soil of the issue? My question for you is like, what would you say to people on their mental health recovery? What should their roots be firmly planted in for their mental health recovery?
Connection.
Yeah.
Connection with family, connection with mental health resources, connected with God, connected with healthy community, connection. And we're here for you. And I'm here for you. Mm-hmm. But my website is Make Someone Great Today. That's also the name of my YouTube channel. And if you're suffering, if you're in a storm right now, we're here to deliver solutions. So go to my website, Make Someone Great Today. You'll see my contact information there, and send me an email, and I will get that confidential email. Nobody reads my emails, and I'll get that confidential message, and then I'll follow up.
Awesome. Yeah. Check them out online. Really, really good stuff. Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate you coming down and being on this podcast. This is really, really fun. It's an honor to have you on.
Well, thanks, Eric, and I hope the viewers and the listeners will benefit from this. And hopefully this podcast will begin to erase shame and deliver education and helpful tools for people that are suffering.
Absolutely. And yeah, so to check out this podcast, it's on Spotify, Soil Talk Podcast. Also check out my video channel on YouTube called S23TV. Check out my social media, Facebook and Instagram at Soil23OC. Like, share, subscribe, follow, and also check out my website for the Soil23 apparel, www.soil23apparel.com. I can't wait to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.